Good morning. This is a story about how the Eck helped me overcome the odds, meet some amazing people along the way, and make my dreams come true. Today I'm going to tell you a story about how I got into medical school. I am not your typical medical school candidate. My colleagues have perfect GPAs, or grade point averages, and they have curated their volunteer and extracurricular activities to prepare for medical school, the application, since they were adolescents. I cannot describe myself that way. I am an eclectic mix at best. There are lots of things about my application that don't quite fit or would be strikes against me. But I decided when I made the decision to go through this application process that I was going to give it my all. I was going to sing you. I was going to see what happened. So I went about this journey that was about a year and a half of going through this application. And it was all encompassing. And I'd find after contemplation that I would have to remind myself and realize continuously that this application did not define me. It had become larger than life in my world, and I, through having done my spiritual exercises, reclaimed my identity not as a GPA, but as soul, and realized that no matter what happened, whether I would become a physician or not, it was merely an option on my spiritual journey. And I was finding throughout that year and a half that without the Eck, that was a concept that was becoming more and more difficult to cling to. So I went about preparing this application and poured my heart into it, defined in these paragraphs what made me not just a potentially good physician, but a good person. And it was hard not to take it personally when you invest yourself in these applications and a school looks at it and says, "No, we're good." But by being able to invite the presence of the Eck Masters and define myself as a channel for the Eck, it let me trust that whatever was going to happen was going to be okay, no matter what. So I began the application process, and as a Canadian, I was applying in both the US and in Canada. And the US system finishes up about 6 months before the Canadian equivalent. So I began my American applications, and I'd had a list of about 30 schools that accepted Canadian applications, and I narrowed it down to 14. The day before I put in my applications, I said in contemplation into the Eck, if there's anything I need to know or should know, I'm all ears. And that night, in a dream, I saw Peter Zask, or Paul G, these spiritual names for Paul Twitchell. And he said to me with some insistence, "You need to apply where I'm from." And I'd listened to the Eck tapes and I'd heard his accent, and I don't understand American geography very well, so I thought this meant like deep, deep south. And I didn't have any schools in that location on my list, so I thought, I guess I'm rehashing this list before I apply tomorrow morning. And I looked, and he's actually from Paducah, Kentucky. And the University of Kentucky had been on that longer list, but I'd looked at the stats and seen that they tend to favor American students, especially from in-state, so it didn't make sense strategically for me to apply. But I figured, okay, I guess that's gonna be school 15, and I applied anyways. The University of Kentucky was the only interview I received. And 2 years earlier, I'd volunteered or been part of a group conversation for newcomers at the Worldwide, and I'd been paired with a veteran Eckist to kind of show me how this is done. And they happened to be a longtime Eckist from Lexington, Kentucky, and him and his wife and I became friends. And they were so nice, they even let me stay with them before the interview. So I got to see Lexington, Kentucky through their eyes the night before and learn about the Eck community there and completely fall in love with Lexington, Kentucky. I felt so loved and supported going into that interview. It completely changed the context for me walking into that office. So one of the interviewers at the University of Kentucky the next day is a retired anesthesiologist. He's 93 and has more energy than I do. And he told me the story about how he'd helped build the University of Kentucky School of Medicine, and he'd escaped Austria to evade persecution by the Nazi regime. He'd lost everyone and everything. This man had suffered greatly, and yet here before me sat someone who lived his life with such an open, glowing heart that it was beyond words for me to be able to express the impact his presence had on me. To this day, I still strive to live my life with a more open heart because of having met him. So I'm then, after the interview, going to the airport, freaking out, and all I could remember were the stupid things I'd said, all the things that weren't elegant or just plain just didn't make sense. And I thought to myself, there's no way I'm getting into this school. There's no way. So I get to the ticket counter, getting my boarding pass, and the gentleman there has a name tag that says Paul G. And he says to me, "How may I serve you today?" with a bright smile. And it kind of shocked me, and I went, I'm not alone. And it reminded me that however this was going to go down, whatever was meant to be would be. So I got back to Canada, and I became really attached to this concept of going to the University of Kentucky. And then the unthinkable happened. I got an interview and an acceptance from a Canadian university. And the same day, I got a letter from the University of Kentucky saying that they would need a holding account worth 2 years of tuition up front before I could start. They told me that this is a possibility, but I'd called and said, that's a lot of money all at once. And they said, oh, don't you worry. For Canadian foreign students, they never actually ask for this. In my case, they did. And it turned out that that Canadian university was exactly where I needed to be. I loved it, I love it, and I'm so happy there. I felt like the Eck had given me not what I wanted, but what I needed. And I still don't know why that experience in Kentucky was necessary. Maybe it'll matter later in life. Maybe it was merely to show me that I am so loved, that the Eck is always in my corner. But I've learned that no matter what, let go of those odds. Trust the Eck, and let it help you make your dreams come true. Thank you.